So we did yesterday a class. We discussed a lot the background of the Seder, different concepts and Kiddush and the Haggadah, the Seder plate. We did a lot of slides about the Seder plate, different details about it, the background of all the different items that we use and why we use them, and a little bit Kabbalah, right? Now we're moving on to part 2. I'm calling it Matza. This is so much. If we could do this in one class, I'll be really, really happy. Okay? We're going to discuss things like some of the laws, customs revolving around this mitzvah, the background, the insights, and some Kabbalah as well.
Who wrote this nonsense?
This is,
That's
yeah.
really good. Is that Matza?
Yeah, somebody's trying to read it. Okay. So, a bunch of concepts I'm going to just tell you about in this first slide. I'm going to jump right in. There's something called Shmura Matzah. It's based on the verse, Ushmartem Samatzah. So you have to guard, which means there's a spiritual component to matzah. It's not just flour and water and nothing else. That could be good for Pesach, and you don't violate chametz if you eat it. But in order to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah the first night, you have to have the flour and water that was baked with a conscious person being consciously thinking about, like, protecting it from becoming chametz for the sake of the mitzvah. The preparing it and baking it has to be for the sake of the mitzvah, and the guarding has to be it has to have human intervention, like and being on top of it to make sure it doesn't become chametz. It's like kavanah almost, by a get document, right? It can have all the right words. We learned about it, a divorce document, but it doesn't have the power to separate the couple unless you had a certain intentions. It's like a spiritual ingredient that matzah needs to have. That's what shmur is, and lishma, the next phrase as well. It has to be for the sake of the mitzvah. But then shmur is another degree in that. It has to be guarded from being, for the sake of the mitzvah, guarded from becoming chametz. That's why in the matzah bakeries or whenever you do matzah, they'll keep declaring and announcing everybody together, l'shem matzah's mitzvah, for the sake of the mitzvah of matzah. Shem matzah's mitzvah. Yeah. So they do that because sometimes they have people who are not so knowledgeable and just like doing the dough. They have a bunch of sometimes women doing it in certain matzah bakeries, and they tell them what it means. Obviously, they don't just say words that they don't understand. They explain. When we say these words, we're refreshing that we're doing it for the sake of the mitzvah. That's why there's a whole question about machine matzahs. If it's kosher to Pesach, it could be better than other ones because there's no human error sometimes. But for the mitzvah, it could be a problem. That's a big question. If you don't have that component, just pushing a button somewhere, right? It's different. But it's not a problem on Pesach because not chametz. That's good. But for the first night, shmur is, we're talking about handmade matzah. Yeah.
Isn't there also like an issue of the machines also has the dough from the previous matzahs?
It could happen anyway. That could happen by humans also. You got to clean it up and do it.
You send it like after every batch or something.
That's your choice. How well they do it.
No, I'm just saying the
machines could be more efficient in cleaning if you program everything and you set it up a certain way. And also matzah bakeries, they sometimes they sand it each time. People have different shifts. They have different chumras. Okay.
Are we going to do a baking matzah session?
Another concept is called ashira. Also, you can't use for the mitzvah.
Richmond.
Matzah ashira. That means it's not chametz. It's kosher to Pesach, but it can't be used to fulfill the mitzvah of the positive mitzvah of eating matzah the first night, which is. If ashira is something that you mix in like fruit juice instead of water.
Yeah, I've had.
If you mix a fruit juice, which you can make a dough, but it'll be kosher to Pesach because it can't become chametz unless there's also some water. But it's not you can't do it for the mitzvah. We're going to soon see more about it. There's a concept of Gebrachs. This is a very extreme stringency that a lot of Hasidic communities do. That just in case the matzah didn't fully bake, there might be a part of it that has some flour, and if it gets a little wet, you could be having chametz. It's very, very unlikely to happen, but it's a way of showing our extreme devotion and extreme carefulness because of all the spiritual benefits of being very, very careful with chametz on Pesach. It's one of the reasons why some communities do this stringency.
So why would the Milva Mashiach they make a point to specifically eat? People they put
In Chabad they actually the last day of Pesach there is after a week of Sfiras Omer, we're going to have a discussion maybe about it in another class. Why? But it's again because it's really an extreme stringency. It's very, very unlikely that there's some flour still there. The way we do it, it's really not concerned. Right, it's a stringency. And then we want to make a statement after a week of Sfiras Omer. It has to do with reaching a certain point that when we make that statement, we intentionally do it. Now, I don't know if everyone does it that way. There's a concept of it being yours. Whole discussion. But usually wherever you are, they give you matzah, they intend you should be able to fulfill the mitzvah. We learn out from lulav. There's when you have to do the mitzvah. It has to be the first night after the 3 stars come out. We said by Kiddush, all the mitzvahs are that night. The Korban Pesach used to be eaten that night with the matzah and the maror. So all the mitzvahs that night have to be after 3 stars. You can't start it early. And before midnight is the main time to do the mitzvah.
Well, it said lachem by matzahs.
We learn it out from.
Well, how could it not be yours if you're going to eat it?
Well, they gave it to you.
No, it's
Still.
it could happen that someone just gives you by a guest. Let's say
Right, but they're giving it to you to fulfill the mitzvah. It's not like a
they know they're not
lulav
getting
that
it
you're
back.
getting it back, so you have to do it properly. It's no issue. They give it to you. That means they obviously intend you should fulfill the mitzvah. The amount we're going to discuss a lot more later, but you have to eat a kazayis min haTorah. That's the size of an olive. We're going to soon see what we actually eat. Okay, how much does that translate in a matzah?
Actually a lot.
It's usually around 1/3 of a matzah. If it's very thin, then if it's like 10 matzahs in a pound, like thin matzahs, then it's like a half a matzah.
How many matzahs?
But most of them, like 7 in a pound, it's like 1/3 of a matzah.
And within a specific time.
Yeah, that's the next thing.
That's on the
Speed.
first night?
We do 2 nights, but the main mitzvah is the first night. So what's the speed? In order to be considered eating, in general in Torah, in order to be considered eating, it has to be something has to be eaten in a certain amount of normal time of eating that food. You hear, Ezzy? Let's save it for later. I want to explain this concept. Like in order to be considered eating, you have to have a significant amount in a normal amount of time. Like it takes time. It's called the time it takes to eat a normal portion. The opinions range from 3 minutes or 3-point-something minutes to like 9 minutes. That's why, for example, the doctor says this person is in danger on Yom Kippur. They have to eat. They must eat. They're in danger. You could ask the doctor, is it okay if they take smaller than an olive size, and then they wait 10 minutes, and then take another smaller than an olive size, and that's okay. It's not considered eating, halachically, in a significant way. It doesn't cross the line. That's the best. Obviously, you can't do that if you're healthy on Yom Kippur, but that's because of this concept that it's not called eating if you do it too small or it's not a big amount. It doesn't combine. You did have more than a kazayis, but you waited 10 minutes, so you kept all the opinions. But by matzah, you want to do it carefully, so you want to eat it quicker. So people do closer to 3-4 minutes because you don't want to be lenient in that. But we'll soon see. We're going to have another class about stringencies versus leniencies and how they interplay. It could get complicated sometimes. Here's some Hebrew terms that I want you to make note of. Ushmartem. This is the verse that says you should guard. You should watch the matzahs. There's lachem. It says by lulav, and we learn out a lot of mitzvahs from the holidays. Also, we learn out you have to eat a kazayis of challah the first night in the sukkah because we learn it out from matzah. And a lot of from Pesach. So we learn there's a lot of mitzvahs that go back and forth between the holidays because they're linked. They're always presented in the Torah together, and they use similar words. Seis is the starting time, and Chatzos is the rabbinic deadline. You really have the whole night, but to actually, you're supposed to try to do it before Chatzos. Again, we'll talk more about it when we discuss the leniencies versus stringencies and how to go about.
Rabbi Giz, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When it comes down to eating matzahs, like certain matzahs during Pesach, like for the first 2 nights, the mitzvah is to eat shmura matzah with like on your table and everything, correct?
Yeah.
So like, why is it that like you can't use like egg matzah or like other types of matzah for that mitzvah? Why does
We just said for the mitzvah it has to be lishma, it can't be ashira, it has to be poor man's bread.
But for the rest of Pesach, like
If it's kosher for Pesach, then it has to do with your own stringencies. If you want to, people just limit a lot of times things what they don't do themselves, or they try to. People have different, stringencies that they do with
They're
their
not
family,
halacha,
their
right?
community.
It's not
We're going to talk much more about it soon. Okay, first a very nice insight from the Chassam Sofer actually about it's a very Chassidish insight, but it comes from the Chassam Sofer. Why not use matzah ashira? Why did the Torah not let you use matzah ashira? Matzah ashira officially can never become chametz. It would be so good. You wouldn't have all the stress. Matzah ashira is fruit juice instead of water. It would taste better, and it cannot become chametz. Only the water could do chametz. So why can't you use matzah ashira? Why? And that's why. So matzah ashira is when you do it, when you put like apple juice or something in instead of water. Then there's another thing. Why don't you? There's other grains besides the 5 grains that we can make matzah from. Also, like rice. There's kidneys. It's a whole other topic. We're not going to go into it now. But there's other grains like rice. Why can't you just make it out of matzah from there? Those grains which don't become chametz. It's considered rotting. Doesn't ferment. It doesn't become leaven. It's a different kind of chemical reaction. Why did the Torah specifically not let you use liquid and not let you use flour that is unable to become chametz? You have to specifically use things that could become chametz. You have to use a combination that's very, very likely to become chametz, and then you have to guard it so it shouldn't become chametz. And that's the whole point. The mitzvah is to use specifically grain that can become leaven and requires human effort and concentration and focus. This is what's valuable to Hashem. This is what makes all our mitzvahs precious as well. And this is the concept about why did Hashem make us this way? With our Yetzer Hara. This is a famous Gemara. I don't know if we have time to do this whole thing. I'll tell you it in English. So the Gemara, page 88 in Shabbos, talks about how Moshe had a court case with the angels about getting the Torah, and they were opposing it. And how did he win the case? He said, do you have a Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara is what qualified us to get the Torah, to fulfill the purpose of creation. It's not a minus. That's the whole meaning. That gives meaning. That's what makes everything meaningful in our lives. Is because we have the challenges that come from having the struggle. That's exactly the concept of matzah. That it has to be that it has that ability to become chametz, and we control it, just like we have the ability to rebel against God or to ignore God, to question God, and we overcome that and we embrace Hashem into our life. That's the whole purpose of Judaism, and that's what you see in the matzah expressed as well. It has to be the right grains and the right liquid that could become chametz, and then you control it. Has to have like a Yetzer Hara, and then you have to have it discipline. That's the word of the Chassam Sofer. Okay, it's called lechem oini.
Sounds like a Hasidic word.
Yeah, it does.
Wait.
Bread of affliction. That's the main translation, but we'll soon see there's more. Where does this verse come from? Where does this phrase come from? It says, Shivas Yamin Teichal Alav Matzos Lechem Oini. It's called Lechem Oini. Why? Because in a haste, in a rush, you departed Egypt. Right? Officially, it says in the verses, and this is in Deuteronomy, but by boy, when the Exodus actually is described, it says they didn't have time to bake the bread, they ran out with it. So, what does the Gemara say on this? Rav Papa says it's called lechem oini, melamid shemaniach prusa b'tay shleima v'tzeya. He says this teaches you it has to be a broken matzah that you use for your meal on Pesach. For lechem mishnah, we're going to soon see. He says we'll soon see exactly it's adding or subtracting, but there's a concept of using a broken matzah. Why? A poor man doesn't have a whole one; he has a broken one. So there's an obligation to fulfill this description. It's called lechem oini, poor man's bread. In what way is it poor? It's a broken one. It's not a complete matzah. Another opinion that's brought. Lechem oini pratel isa shenilusha b'yayin v'shemen udvash. The lav lechem oini. This is coming to exclude. This is the source that it can't be matzah ashira. You cannot use for the mitzvah matzah ashira that has honey in it and wine and things added to it. Even if it can become chametz, by the way, because there's also some water. But it can't be rich man's bread. It couldn't be like tasty. It has to be have all these interesting, nice, expensive, fancy flavors. It has to be an experience of that bittul, that simple, plain, just flour and water. That's what we learn out. Another thing that we learn out from what the Torah calls an oini. A third point, it's brought there. Ksiv oni v'kadin an oini. Amar Shmuel lechem she'oini alav dvarim harbe. It's written oni, but it's pronounced. The tradition is we pronounce it with a cholim. Oini, like what oini means. You recite, you respond. The bread has to be in front of you. This poor man's bread, it's not poor. It's bread that you speak over it. You have it in front of you, and you talk about Pesach. It's basically telling you the concept that when you talk about the Exodus this night, you should have the actual kind of bread that we had that night. You should have it in front of you. We combine everything, so we have a broken matzah in front of us, which is why when do we break the matzah? Right before we start talking about the story, before Magid, before we do the story of Pesach.
Isn't there also a time that's called like Malachim because it's like
Is that the next one? Or just go one more.
Rabbi, is it ani? That's ani?
Wait, what do you want to shift?
I was talking about how in Aini it says the Hab has a sikh on it. What's the difference between kapitel tzaddik versus kapitel kufes, which is tefillah l'moshe versus tefillah l'ani.
That's a
Tefillah l'ani is that when a person is in a state of aniyus, he's able to daven from the depths of the depths of the depths.
so that would relate to the basic concept. All these ideas about bittul, broken, not have fancy taste. That would all be the chassidus of that.
Yeah.
What you're sharing is the chassidus explaining more, expanding. Yeah. That's going to get to the next slide. Or that's coming up in a later slide. We have that, but here I have one more point. What's brought in the Talmud. Lechem oini. This is an interesting, not so known idea. Ma darka shel oni hu masik v'ibtei oife. The way a poor person has to do things is he puts the husband, the father is putting the wood in, and the wife is baking it. Also here, the way it's better to do it yourself. This is a concept where a lot of people try to do. It's a special hiddur to actually be involved somewhat, to some extent, in your own matzah baking.
Rabbi,
a concept.
When are we
It comes
going
from
to
there.
do matzah this year?
Let's talk about it after the class, okay?
Forever, when you said ani, that's ani, like for me?
No.
Oini. Look, it's with the ayin.
It's like poor.
Poor. Oni. Everything we're saying. He's basically putting fuel. Masik is he's putting wood in the fire, and his wife is baking. They can't afford servants and to buy it, so they make it them. They have to do it like it's a home production. So that's the same. That's the idea. So I'm saying it's an Indian. It's mentioned in Gemara that it's like you do it yourself. Okay. Here I have some English. The 4 points. Should be broken. Shouldn't be fancy. Recite the Haggadah over it. She'oinin love, or it's a concept of doing it yourself. And this is what Moshe was saying. Most of it has to do with the bittul being. It's because that's the theme. We're again at Pesach. We said the main thing is going out of Mitzrayim, which is the worst Mitzrayim is ego. Yeah, what do you want to share?
The third point, reciting the Magid over it.
Yeah.
Referring to the broken piece.
Exactly. That's why we mix, we combine, we try to fulfill all of these. So we break the matzah before we recite the Haggadah. Let's move on a little bit. Mysticism. It's brought. We'll talk more about this in other classes. I just want to go through these concepts. The first day it's called Michla Nusa. The matzah is good for your emunah. It helps you with emunah the whole year. Eating the matzah you have in mind, it helps you have faith, that trust in Hashem.
Big trust.
The second day it says it helps with healing. So it's brought in the Zayar. Michla de Asvasa. It's called like food or bread of faith, of healing. So just good to keep in mind some more benefits of matzah. And now, if you made it this far, I just brought that part. Right. So the kids never let David forget the year he just couldn't find Africa. But yeah, I guess they stuck it on his back. Okay, what's with the matzah? What's the official reason why we're eating matzah?
Is the Lord in
You probably heard one or two, and we're gonna get to your thing soon. But there's actually 3 sources of matzah. 3 basic reasons for this interesting food that we eat, this kind of bread. Okay, number 1. Ozzy, look at this. He loy chametz. He gershom mitzrayim. They made it like cakes of matzah, of unleavened bread. He loy chametz. It didn't rise. He gershom mitzrayim because they were expelled from Egypt. They couldn't wait and let it rise. They didn't prepare other food. They were rushing out. So it says as they were leaving, they didn't have time to bake it and to let it rise before baking it. So they just they left in a rush, physically and also spiritually. It's a lot of ideas behind this, but this is the famous idea that it said straight out in the pasuk. However, there's another pasuk. They were told to eat that night before the firstborn plague. They were told to take a sheep, remember, keep it in their bed for 3 days, and slaughter it, have a korban pesach. Nothing to do with that. They were told to eat the korban with unleavened bread. So there's a matzah that's not connected to the fact that they had to rush out and they couldn't do it. And there's a lot of chassidus about this as well. Just want to share with you the third source, and that is the Ibn Ezra writes this reason. He said he himself was personally captured by pirates once. So he was traveling. He was in Spain. He was in North Africa. He had a lot of adventures. And at one point he was captured by pirates, kept on some island somewhere in a cave until he ended up being freed. And he testified that they would feed them matzah because it was very common to feed slaves this kind of food. Because it keeps people like full. A little bit matzah, the way the body deals with it is it sits more in the stomach, and you have to feed them a little less apparently, and that's what was a common thing. So he writes that the same thing was in Egypt. There was the matzah of slavery. You have the matzah of freedom, and then you have the matzah of transition. That's what it looks like. You have three associations with matzah. It represents the slavery. It's like an oini. Then is the transition. They had to eat matzah with the korban pesach as it was happening, as the makas v'chayris is about to happen. And then there was a matzah that was like automatically. They didn't have time. It didn't become matzah. Now, like they didn't have to do anything. They had to rush out. And it says it was, they couldn't prepare it properly. So these are the 3 classic sources. But then what Ezzy says is very true. The main intent is to connect to Hashem, that you're doing a mitzvah. That's the main kavanah, but always in a mitzvah. Then after this, you could think all the other details about we're constantly remembering this, the matzah of this, the matzah of the night, the matzah as we left, the matzah before we left, and like we mentioned in the Agada itself. Okay. Moving along.
Silas matzah is a mishpat. Edus are like.
It's officially Edus.
Okay.
And that could be why the wise son starts off with Edus, because that's the mitzvah of the night. It says Ma Edus v'achukim v'mishpat. Right? What's with the Edus? It's like in the middle. You wouldn't have thought of it maybe to do it that way, but it has a association, a creation of aspect to it, like a lot of the holiday things. Okay. So first of all, the way you put the matzahs in. First, you're supposed to put the bottom one, then the middle one, and then the Kohen. The Yisrael, the Levi, and the Kohen. The three matzahs.
So, Aleph, maybe,
Right? First Yisrael, V'alav, Levi, right? And then why? What's this? What's the word? So, what does it spell? If you do it that way,
Yeah.
Yele, to go, to be proactive, active, right? Kohen, if you do it the other way, if you put the Kohen first, and the Levi, and then the Yisrael, what does it spell?
Keli.
Kli, which is receiving, just passive. Give me. I want to, and you want, the message is that when it comes Pesach, you want to be going aggressively, trying to get as much as you could, mitzvahs and whatever you could, whatever you're doing, right? You want to be proactive. And one of the themes of Pesach is connecting with your family and your children and giving anything, matzah, every mitzvah, hider. You don't just want to okay, what do I have to do now? Just tell me what to do. You want to be going forward. Okay, that's just an insight.
but still, that's a, I mean, it's nice garden, but is that the reason?
No,
for the word?
not necessarily. I don't know if that's the reason. I think that word comes after. But we had yesterday, we did a thing that all the details of the Seder, there's always significance, and there's many layers of significance. Okay?
So who made all the how we should do it like this or like that, right?
If it's mentioned in the Agada, you'll see sometimes it brings sources there. So I'm going to take this opportunity to remind everybody to read a little bit every day. Make sure you spend some time before Mincha. Try to do the Agada, the Mishnayos, and the general knowledge. I posted a lot of stuff, general knowledge. Are you on the group, by the way?
Probably.
They put you on the group? One, or maybe the current one. Someone has to forward it to you. I put it on the old one.
Just have the route.
Put it on the older
One
one.
of us.
Okay. Now we're going to get a little more into the nitty-gritty of eating matzah. How is it eaten? How much is it eaten? And why? And when? I mentioned before, you just got to eat a kazayas the first night of Pesach. But what it actually plays out is, you know how many we actually eat? How much matzah we actually eat?
Big
10
mountains.
pounds.
A lot.
What?
A lot.
10.
2.5. 1.5.
5 kazayas. At least. Besides
Is
Shulchan Aruch.
1.5 5 kazizim?
We try. I'll explain to you. I'm going to show you how we get to that, okay?
I think so.
That's what I want to show you, okay?
1.5 is 5 kazizim, right?
Oh, that's what you're saying, matzahs. Oh, okay, yeah. It depends. 1 2/3. If you're going by a third, it has to be 1 2/3. I'm going to show you now the sources and the background, how we end up with all the different matzahs we eat, the different opinions behind it, and how we get to it, okay? So first, let's start with the basics. Ahiba Yem Hashishi, on the 6th day, they collected Lechem Mishnah, the mon. It's talking about the mon. Parshas B'Shalach, right? When they started getting special food from heaven, they would get a double portion on Fridays. And also out of Yom Tov.
And it still wasn't good enough for them.
Sure it was.
Oh no.
So the Shulchan Aruch brings this down and says as follows. Five kol adam livtzaya al shteki kodesh shleimus. That everyone on Shabbos or Yom Tov, when you start your meal, you're supposed to break the bread, start the meal with 2 complete matzahs, 2 complete breads. Man and woman, samach lazeh, shenemar loktu lechem mishnah, because it says that they had lechem mishnah. So to remember that, the specialness, how Hashem sanctified Shabbos in that way with the double portion. So every Shabbos meal, we start with 2 whole breads. That's a famous idea. Hope you're familiar with it. And that applies every week and every holiday. What about Pesach? We mentioned before that Amar Papa lechem malamet shemaniach prusa b'toich shleima uveitzeya. Pesach we use a broken matzah. There's a concept of using a broken matzah because it's called oini. That's one of the first points we mentioned. That's supposed to be something's supposed to be broken about the matzah. It's like a poor man's bread. It's broken. So now we have debate number 1. Is it a plus or a minus? Are you supposed to use a broken matzah? This is our first
A
debate.
full and a broken, or just a?
Is it taking away from the lechem mishnah instead of 2 whole matzahs or 2 whole breads that you use every every Shabbos and Yom Tov. But Pesach is the lechem oini. Does that say you're supposed to use 1.5 instead? Or is it supposed to be 2.5? You're supposed to add a broken matzah. That's what you're supposed to have. That's the two opinions. So the Rosh says, this is from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, but he brings two opinions. The Rosh says you're supposed to add one, and the Rambam says you're supposed to do one less. Instead of 2, you do 1.5.
That's what my family does.
What would be the logic for?
Let's see the two opinions. Because the Torah says, general, there's a concept of lechem mishnah, and then by Pesach, there's a concept of lechem oini.
Right.
So is that adding, or is that replace instead? Do you take one of those two matzahs should be broken, or is it you have to have 2 for the month, 2 lechem mishnah, and then for Pesach you add a broken matzah? Right. Let's see the two things how it's brought here. Let's do it quickly inside. Afal pisha b'chol yom tov. Chayev adam livtzaya al lechem mishnah. K'moshe yisbar b'simen tav kuf chavtes. Even though, let's see if I could do this laser pointer like this. Everyone could see this on the screen too?
Yeah.
All right, I trust you. Afal pisha b'chol yom tov. Even though every holiday, chayev adam livtzaya al lechem mishnah. You have to start your meal by making a bracha on 2 whole breads, which is 529, chapter 529. Nevertheless, below Pesach, the night of Pesach, yesh aimrim, some say she'ein tzarich, it's not required. Ki'im achas umechza, 1.5. Lefi, because shedarshu chachamim, because this that the rabbis derive, mimasha kasa lechem oini, chaser vav. From this, they call the matzah is called lechem oini without a vav, which means a poor man. Shetehei matzah prusa, kedarke shaloni, like a poor person's bread. Let's just finish this. Loi darshu elo ligraya milechem mishneh. She'achas mehem loi tiyeh shlema. That one of them should not be complete. That's the first opinion. Yeah.
Can I just say, isn't the idea if you see on Mispal Shtar, it's a literally the word lahaisiv is epithet Indian of an other.
Where are you reading? Further?
Number 2.
I'm about to. Wait, I'm about to get to it. Number 2, that's how you should understand the Gemara. When our Papa said it's called lechem oini to teach you that there's a concept of representing a poor person's bread because it should be a broken one.
Lahaisiv?
What?
How does that make sense? Lahaisiv to represent the onion?
No, we're not. We do that this night of the Seder. We do a lot of things like a rich, a lot of things like poor. But there's a concept of obviously lechem mishneh, which is because of the month. You don't want to take away from that. You want to also add something else to symbolize to say that God over that should be like a poor man's piece of bread. But don't take away from the classical, the basic. Understand? Let's should have. Besides for the 2 basic ones, 2 complete matzahs,
Oh, Rabbi, you figured out the pointer.
So the main custom is to just do 2.5. You know why? Because then you fulfill both. You would do the 1.5 like the Rambam.
You're right.
And you would only get you would not fulfill the properly according to the Rosh.
Yeah.
But the Rambam is just saying you could use 1.5, and it's fine. That's like a heter to do it on Pesach, like because of lechem oini. But no one's going to say you lose out on anything if you do 2.5.
I thought that the only day that the mon fell in the double portion was on Erev Shabbos.
Also, Erev Yom Tov, same reason.
Erev Yom Tov too, the same thing?
Yeah. Because they have to do it before Shabbos.
So, Rabbi, my family.
It's not a day to go around. Yeah.
My family does it like how Rambam says we do 1.5.
So they do it wrong.
You'll see in the Seder you have in the plate. No, we're going to learn soon what to do. It's not.
Crazy. That's a crazy comment. That's not acceptable.
My family's traditions.
Got to get to know Ezzy. He's usually something deep. Or he's tired. Okay, it's probably not so simple, but you're gonna in the choir you have 3 matzahs, or you start off with 2.
Well, Or like how we have the
The
Yisrael.
ka'ara, you have a main Seder plate?
Yeah.
You have 3 or 2?
2.
2 you start off?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you could be following the Rambam's thing, which
Yeah, that's
could
what
be
it says.
Shulchan Aruch.
Follow
Okay.
The Rambam is
So-
Sephardi.
Oh, I wonder why a Sephardi family does it that way, Ezzy.
Hey.
So your family isn't true.
I'm gonna throw a book at you. Don't try.
Okay. Debate number 2. It's not finished yet.
We're being recorded.
Yeah, you are. You're gonna be on live. I'm not editing this. I didn't do a joke in 3 slides. 3 slides, I didn't have a joke. That's only shit.
Shipment's like, dang.
Debate number 2. Which blessing on which matzah? Okay. So now,
I'm so poor that I haven't.
there's 2.
It's,
You have to make up what, right? And then there's,
yeah, I get more months.
you hear Ezzy? This is something like, you have to hook up. There's a blessing ala chilas matzah, and then there's a mitzi. Okay?
What's interesting, sorry, is that the is after the whole story, whereas the Lesher Ba'ani is before the whole story.
Why? What do you mean?
Because when did the man fall? When the desert after Plague's had Nisan? When did
No, but the verse of Aini, interesting idea. But first of all, it's a little bit after. But the actual word, the verse that says that calls matzah lechem Aini is a chumash devar, which is 40 years later. It's actually called lechem Aini. The mitzvah.
What is the
No, that's when we're told that when you symbolize it, you should do it. But lechem mishneh was already is represented earlier. But either way, let's see let's see what it brings it. So after again, you have in the Shulchan Aruch. Well, this is maybe I took it from somewhere else. It looks like you should hold all 3 for the first bracha. This is what we do. You say Hamoitzi because you need 2 shleimas for lechem mishneh. But some say you should have for lechem mishneh also a half. So you use the all 3, which is 2.5. Because you put away half for Afikoyma. So you have 2.5, all 3 matzahs, whatever's left of them, you use for the first blessing, which is Amoitzi. Then you release the bottom one, and you say the bracha al achilas matzah. You just on holding the 1.5 that's left. This is what we do. Because again, we're going to eat a kazayis from each, because we're not sure which to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, of eating matzah. We said you have to have a broken matzah to say the Agada over. But to eat matzah, which one is it to eat the kazayis of matzah? Should you do it from the prusa or should you do it from the whole matzah? The whole matzah. That it's also a debate. So what we're going to try to do is take a kazayis from each. That's how we have our first 2 kazaisim. And each one could be, and we hold both of those, the half and a whole one, by the bracha of achilas matzah, because of these 2 opinions. And you can't put salt on any of them, and eat a kazayis. We're going to soon see different details.
Should you have in mind when you eat these 2 kadesim that it's corresponding to a certain, let's say, you're doing the mitzvah with this kadais or that kadais, or it's just to fulfill both 2 opinions?
So you're fulfilling, you should have in mind to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach, like any mitzvah. You want to be mindful that you're doing a mitzvah now. That's the basic mitzvah sichas kavod. Even though by matzah it says when you have physical pleasure from it, it's a little less. Okay, therefore, here's what comes out. I'm not going to do that all inside now. Therefore, we hold all 3 matzah for the bracha of Hamaitzi, because you want to have lechem mishneh. Now you understand why. Because of these 2 debates. You have to have 2, but also the prusa, because some say you have to have 1.5. A half one when you make the bracha, instead of lechem mishneh. We hold the top 2, which is 1.5 for the bracha of al achilas matzah. And then we take a kazayis from both. And we lean by both. Because we're both kazayis. Because there's different opinions. Which one is the mitzvah of achilas, of eating the matzah, the kazayis matzah? We also try to chew both together. This, you hear about this? It's more advanced. Look at his mouth.
Yeah, my mom told me that you should both.
There's because you made the bracha al achilas matzah, right? You don't want to do something else. So you take both kazesim and try to break it up and put it into your mouth as much as possible. At least some of it. And we don't put salt on either one because you can't have the mitzvah of matzah can't be diluted. For when you have to eat a kazayis, and if you put other taste into it, it takes away, detracts from the mitzvah experience. This is despite the fact that you don't need more than 2 for lechem mishnah, we do 2.5 because of the debate. You don't need more than 1 for al achilas matzah. Only a bite is enough for a maitzi. So we take a kazayis from each one because we don't know which one's the maitzi, which one's the matzah. Which matzah it is. We do both blessings. And only the al achilas matzah requires leaning. When you're eating the matzah of the mitzvah. We don't know. We do 2 kazesim and we're not sure which is which. So we do all these things. And our maitzi is usually dipped in salt, but we can't do it here because if the matzah one, the mitzvah of matzah, there's 2 things. There's lechem mishnah. You're having a meal in honor of a yom tiv. You have to start off with bread. And if that's separate, if that's supposed to be from the pursa, then the other one, the matzah is from the whole. So therefore we do all these things. And that's how we get to our first 2 kazesim. Okay? Then, okay, we're going to talk about the murr, we're going to talk about the sandwich. That's when we have the 3rd kazayis. Use 1 more kazayis matzah for the sandwich. Then we have 2 more kazayisim by the afikomer, if possible, only if possible. 1 kazayis corresponding to the carbon pesach, and 1 kazayis corresponding to the matzah that was eaten together with carbon pesach, which was eaten at the end, after your meal. That's when we eat afikomer. That's what afikomer represents. We don't have the carbon pesach. We want to remember, some say it's supposed to be the matzah that you had with it, at least have that matzah. Some say it's actually representing the carbon pesach. So we end up doing 2 kazesim, if you could. And this is after the meal.
Yeah, how do you fit all that in one piece of the afi? Like one.
You could add one
It's not
matzah
that
to it.
big. Oh.
You could add one matzah to it. Though, if you really did it perfectly, it works. So if 1/3 of a matzah is a kazayis,
Yeah.
you got 1/3
Then
left.
add
Take the
a
big
half.
half of afikomer, it's 2/3. But there's really nothing wrong. You just add some more matzah when you do it. It's just a concept of having a broken matzah in the beginning of the seder. That's the main reason for yachas. Afikomer means just eat matzah and have in mind these 2 things. But the answer, it doesn't have to really be that piece, despite all the stories about what happened there. You don't really have to use that matzah that you put aside. Take any matzah. So your kids can't hold you hostage. We lean also by the afikomer, and only if you are able to eat 2 kazayisim. The first taisus in the last chapter of Psachim, one of the first taisus on the first page there, he says about how eating when you have to stuff yourself is disrespectful to the mitzvah. You're not gaining it.
Why to the left?
Health reasons. The windpipe. It shouldn't go into the windpipe.
Because
The food
me
pipe.
and Yosef were talking about it. Maybe it was because like Rambam says.
No, the food. The food pipe is on the on the right side.
Are you going to tell us which foods and which times to go to the left?
We're doing that now. We just said the first 2 kazesim, moitzi matzah, and then again by afikomer. We're going to learn more. But the 4 cups we mentioned already, and we're going to do more about it soon.
So when I eat my afikomen, if I find it, I have to eat it on the left.
You lean always to the left.
I found it last year.
Wait, leaning there's 2 concepts. There's leaning is a chayristi. Like we said before, a lot of things we do this night is to express freedom. And then to the left is because of a health concern. You don't want the food to go down the windpipe. Okay. This is what I was telling Tzvi. Feel free to add matzah. It's very unlikely that you divided exactly 2/3 for the afikomer and 1/3 for your state in your plate. It's very unlikely. So therefore, you could feel free to add more matzah. It's not a problem. Okay? Reminder to drink water first. Because the custom is you want to have the taste of the afikomer and stay. We're going to have 2 cups of wine afterwards. But there's no more drinking or eating, if possible, afterwards. And there might be dancing, there might be wine, but we try not to do. We want to have the taste of the mitzvah. It says in the last law of Psachim, the last
You
Mishnah.
shouldn't.
We don't do anything after the Korban Pesach or these days after the Afikomen. Chabad Kosher not to steal the Afikomen. Yeah, in some communities, not to make fun. It's based on a Gemara, some matzahs. They would do something with it. There's some kind of entertainment. To keep the children engaged, they hide it. They try to steal it. They get a prize. There's a lot of stories and anecdotes about this, but Chabad Kosher not to steal. It's a night of chinuch, and to be very careful with the messages you give children and what they taste. You don't want them to taste the excitement of taking something and sneaking something. We want to be sensitive to that on this night. That's our approach. That it could be detrimental to them. Just like children, they taste falsehood. It's not good. It's not good. And same thing with tasting, stealing, and sneaking, and those skills. How to get something. We don't encourage that. My parents would say, we just, participate and say that we'll give you the same prize that your friends are getting if you heard, if you're jealous. Don't worry about it. We try to discourage.
Rabbi, did your family have a custom of like whoever found the Afikomen gets like a prize or something?
Did you hear what I just said?
Oh yeah, I'm stupid. I'm sorry.
What?
No, I'm getting like that's what it was going off of. Okay.
Okay. I was saying that we don't encourage stealing. Yeah, it's just sneaking it. One year I did do with my kids like some kind of treasure hunt for it. Instead, I prepared a bunch of clues and I put it in different svarim around the room and around the house or in different places. And each clue sent them. I had time one year to prepare it. Maybe this year I'll do it. But you could get kids excited. It's okay. But I did it honestly. I didn't do anything dishonest. It was all together. They just had to solve each clue and send it to the next until they found out Afikomen and told them the last clue said some like interesting thing.
Wow.
So I did it more whatever. I made it like
But
they complicated.
Only
It's like one of them was like, I'm the third sefer in the biggest set of svarim in this house. They found it and then stopped it. And then they found the page. And then there was a paper that said the first thing they ever printed. They go to they find a lot of them. I use svarim. I don't know. I remember I sent them also around the house. It was
But
fun.
doesn't it suck because like only one of them can?
No, they all did it together. It was exciting.
But like, how does that work?
The older kids are actually solving it, and the younger ones are running away.
Running with them, yeah.
And in the end, they did whatever they found. It just not. I think it's not to encourage stealing. Okay. When is it a mitzvah? There's many degrees. Okay. So let's do a quick overview. Ezra, you ready?
Easy.
A kazayas, Ezra, the first night, a kazayas between Seis and Chatzos. Okay? This is the main biblical mitzvah. Shalom. Then there's another 4 kazesim which we just learned about during the first night of Seder. Right? That's also different because of the when to do it, which one, which matzah exactly. But mere minimum, someone's in a tight situation, very limited, or someone. One year my father ended up in the hospital, Pesach. It was he had some infection right before Pesach. It was a little crazy, right? If you have an extreme situation, just have to eat one kazayas matzah the first night of Pesach, and to do the mitzvah. It's like tefillin. It's a mitzvah for eating kazayas matzah on the first night of Pesach.
I think last year the second Seder started at like 11:30. What was that?
Dang.
Then there's 5 kazayas in the second night because of the second day Yom Tif in the diaspora. So the same 5 kazayas, but they're all equal the second night because the whole
You
thing.
said so far 4 kazesim.
We said and Kairech is the 5th.
Oh, fair.
We mentioned
You
it.
mentioned it? I didn't.
Yeah. Any extra matzah the first night between Chatzos and Seis is brought in Svarim. Again, what you can handle, you can eat it in a respectful way. It has spiritual benefits. It has spiritual positive benefit just eating matzah the first night. We said it helps with emunah, and it helps with health and so on. And then there's even brought in Sfarim that just as a concept to eat matzah on Pesach, it has spiritual benefits. Again, officially, the main thing is just only chametz. And there are people who limit matzah, but it's brought as far that that eating matzah, like it has that bittul, it has that thing, again, in a healthy way, what works for you, but this is just to know, good to know.